from George Bernard Shaw that says, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man adapts the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends upon the unreasonable man." We always like to add "and woman" at the end of that. But that's part of our philosophy, is to find those entrepreneurs that are taking on the really tough challenges and that are willing to be courageous and audacious enough to be unreasonable and try to do something sometimes a little bit crazy. So the entrepreneurs we work with, we focus on East Africa. Our current countries of focus are Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. We look for social enterprises. The way that we define that is companies that are having a meaningful impact on the lives of people or on the planet. We want those companies to have their impact baked into the business model, meaning the way they create revenue is also the way that they create impact. We do tested concepts. That for us, that means that these companies already have a product or service. They prototyped, they're out in the market. Usually they've iterated or modified their product or service at least once. They're making some revenue, but they're typically pre-profit. And we look for companies that have a high potential to scale, both in terms of ambition to scale, as well as the way they've designed their model. Great. So our model, what we do, we are based off of the model of the Unreasonable Institute, which was started 6 years ago in the United States. Taken that model and modified it for the East Africa context. So what we do, we take about 10 to 15 companies each year and work with them over the course of that year pretty intensively, but with an idea that we are going to provide them support for the lifetime of their business. During that 1 year more intense support, the most intense support comes during a 5-week boot camp. That's residential, so all of our entrepreneurs come and live in a house with our team, with mentors, with investors. It's a very intensive working period. And during that time, we focus both on technical elements of the business. For example, we have a financial architect team that builds financial models for each of our companies and works with them to understand those models. But also soft skills. We're very focused on relationships, strong and deep relationships, and see those as essential for entrepreneurs to be able to get the support they need to keep going and grow their business over time. So we do a lot on that as well. Oh, I ran out on the slides. Okay. So our results, we've had 2 classes so far. That's 21 entrepreneurs from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. Great. And 1 from South Sudan this year. All of those companies are still in operation, and collectively they've raised over $5 million in investment and benefited over 350,000 lives. Generally, what our entrepreneurs say in terms of key takeaways from our program are that they have increased clarity in their strategic direction when they're able to take a step back from their day-to-day operations. Also, their increased network of support, that's in terms of investment, in terms of mentors, in terms of partnerships, and increased confidence that they are headed in the right direction for their business. We were just talking at lunch, and I think my panelists probably have had similar experiences with the continued challenges that we see after our program. Fundraising, we do a lot on investment support. It's still a very hard process, and we see our companies continue to have challenges there. Cash flow, some of that also ties back to fundraising. And management, getting key positions on their team. Again, that can be because of funding. It can also be just finding the right talent for those positions. So how we pay for it. This speaks to some of your research. Our first year, we had a pretty traditional model. Our entrepreneurs paid upfront tuition of $3,000 to $4,000. As you can see from the chart, that didn't cover very much of our operating costs. It's only about 15%. So in 2015, we piloted a new business model. That model included the upfront tuition, which we help our entrepreneurs raise on an online crowdfunding platform, but then also has a revenue share component. So all of our companies from this year signed revenue share agreements with us and will be paying us 2% of their annual revenues up to a cap of $10,000. This is an experiment. Be very interested to talk to anyone who's had experience here, who's thinking about doing it. If it works, we expect to be able to recover the money from our companies this year in about 3 to 5 years, and that would cover about 40% of our operating costs. So it's an exciting direction for us, and I look forward to the rest of, oh, and I should say, we didn't strategically launch our applications to open today, but our applications have been open for a couple weeks and will still be open for a couple weeks. So if there are any entrepreneurs in the audience that this sounds good to, please check us out.
As Mary introduced, I'm Nicole DeMarsh. I am a principal with Open Capital Advisors. And what we as Open Capital do is we help businesses across East and Southern Africa raise capital and help them to grow and scale their business. And fundamentally what we are is we are a management consulting and financial services advisory firm. And the reason we really came into being, I think, speaks a lot to the theme on the panel this morning and some of the things we've been talking about today. We were hearing two very conflicting stories. We heard entrepreneurs saying, I have a great product, I've got a great idea, I have a talented entrepreneur, there's huge market potential, and no one's giving me money. And at the other side, we are hearing investors saying, I've raised a fund, I want to deploy this capital, I want to invest, and I can't find any investment-ready businesses. And there's clearly this divide, this gap in the market, and that's really where we came into being. So Open Capital opened operations in Nairobi 6 years ago in an attempt to try and bridge this gap. So in the 6 years that we've been in operation, we've now worked with 75 SMEs across East and Southern Africa, and in particular, we've helped them raise $50 million. I should clarify, we don't help all of our businesses raise capital. Some of them are looking for alternate sources, they're bootstrapping, whatever. But it's about an average of about $1 million per raise, ranging anywhere from about $100,000 to $10 million. And so we've been able to really work with these SMEs, help them figure out how to grow and help them raise investment. At the same time, we also work with investors. So we have a deep investor network, obviously, that helps us to raise the capital for our clients, but we also engage directly with investors. And we will do pre or post investment support for them. So this is an engagement where an investor is paying for us to work with a portfolio company and help them to get investment ready. And so what we really understand is both the investor side and the entrepreneur side and the challenges that both of these sides face in trying to come together and be able to get capital and deploy this capital. So in terms of what that bridge actually looks like and that gap, as I mentioned, we see businesses in the region. You've got a really talented and committed entrepreneur who wants to make his or her idea work. Someone who's got an interesting or compelling product or service and a deep understanding and expertise in it. They will talk for hours on end about this product and all of its specifications. And also typically market potential. I mean, this is an exciting market. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of need. And so many SMEs that are looking to solve some really big, interesting problems. At the same time, we see requirements that basically all investors have. And we're talking later stage, but also people who will classify themselves as early stage investors. And they all require a demonstrated strategy. How are you going to grow? What is your strategy to do that? They want to see a justified capital need. Tell me why you need this money. What are you going to do with it and what's going to come of that? They also want an efficient due diligence process. I mean, we heard on the panel this morning how many businesses Duncan looks at and screens before being able to make an investment. It's a really time-consuming and challenging process, and investors want that to be as streamlined and transparent as possible. And last but not least, they want compensation for risk. They want to understand really what is this business doing, what's its potential, what's its growth, and also, risk here, compensation for risk can also be about impact potential. What's the risk in this model, both financially and from an impact perspective. And as you can imagine, there's a lot in between here, right? And for each entrepreneur, for each SME, those gaps are going to vary a little bit based on the stage of the business, based on the expertise on the management team. But where we really come in is helpful this middle. And so one of those big things is prioritizing opportunities. Yes, there are a million different ways you can go. Which markets do I open? Which counties do I move into? Do I roll out this product or that? Do we do direct distribution or do we partner? There's a lot of questions and challenging questions, and how do you prioritize those and think about staging them, and which strategy, frankly, makes the most sense? How do you build an organization structure? Today, you've got 1 or 2 people on your founding team, perhaps. That needs to grow and scale as the organization grows and scales. And I think what we see consistently, and Kate was talking to this too, talent is hard to find, and find the right talent who wants to come into an early stage business, take the risk alongside you at the middle management level, but then also how do you find the right operational people that you can trust and who can grow with the business. Again, in line with this demonstrated strategy, what's the clear plan for growth? What do you do? What do you do next? When that capital comes in, what happens afterwards? How does an investor have faith that when they invest, this business is ready to hit the ground running and really just start executing? And really all they've been waiting for is the money to be able to do that. I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs get really nervous about, is these financial projections. An investor is going to come in and ask, okay, where's your DCF? What's the ROI on that? They do have high expectations in terms of defensible financial models, defensible projections, a defensible valuation that they can invest against. And we help to do that as well. As I mentioned, the capital need. What exactly are you using that money for? When you say $200,000, what's that going to do? What's that going to get me as a business and an investor? And then the last one, just really formalizing the structures of an operation. In an early stage business, of course, you're running around, you're trying to do a million things at once. And at least for the first while, you can kind of do that on coffee and sheer will. Eventually that runs out, and as you reach a certain size, you really need to start having those systems in place. You need clear financial records. Yes, for investors, but also to be running your own business. So what do those systems and processes look like, and how do you get them into place early enough so that you're setting yourself up for success and building that really, really strong, solid foundation to enable you to grow? So those are the sorts of things that we as Open Capital do. And in terms of this type of support that we do, we differ a little bit from Growth Africa and Reasonable, that ours is one-on-one support. So we staff a team of, from Open Capital, working directly with an SME, so that it is very, very targeted and specific. And what are the 4 or 5 huge gaps and questions that a business needs to fulfill in order to become investment ready? And I think that's a common theme that we're all talking about here, and that big question, how do I get investment ready? How do I get to the point that investors are excited to invest in me? So I'll stop there, but that is Open Capital's model briefly, and kind of where we see the gaps in the market and opportunities for BDS players to really come in and make a difference.
Is this on? Okay, good. So thank you. I think that is a good place for us to stop for now. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask all of you a couple of questions just to get the ball rolling, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the participants. So this question of investment readiness came up in the morning panel. I think I hear the term investment ready more than I hear any other term in my day-to-day job. And I just wanted to find out from you, what is the one, so just one, what is the single biggest challenge you think entrepreneurs face? why are they not investable even after, you know, all these interventions have been thrown their way? Why are they still not investable? Who wants to start?
I think the biggest thing that we hear from investors is a structured, believable plan for growth. Again, if I'm going to be putting money into this business, what's going to come of it? And faith that is a realistic plan to deliver against.
I would say to add on to that, or maybe a complementary piece of that, is the documentation. So you have to understand it to have the documents. You need to have the documents to understand it. But we see a lot of our companies struggle with having good financial documents.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. I would add not having a fundamental understanding of the environment that you're working in, so the reality that you as a business and as an entrepreneur is operating in. I think that's probably the number one thing for us.
I think it also kind of matters on if you consider yourself to be investable. It really depends on which investor you're talking to. So investor A might consider you to be investment ready, which is great, and you only sometimes need one. But investor B might not, and I think it's really difficult, particularly when you're an incubator or accelerator. One-on-one, it might be a little different, particularly when you have a network, but it might be quite difficult to say, okay, now they are investment ready for investor A to Z. That's impossible to create, and I think there also lies the difficulty in transforming businesses into being something that is investable.
If I can just add one thing to that. I think, one thing to understand is no matter what a business does, there will be certain investors who aren't interested, right? Everyone has a defined investment mandate that the investment committee makes decisions against. So there's a lot you can do to get it to the point that it is attractive for those investors, that it's an interesting fit for, but you're absolutely right. There are going to be some that say, that's wonderful, but I only invest in education. So great healthcare company.
Can I just add to your addition? And I know this is something that OCA does very well, and I think this is something that, however you want to define accelerators, that should be one of the key things that they do. They should curate the approach that you are having as an entrepreneur to investors in order not to waste investors' time, but also not to waste your own time.
Excellent. I think that's a really good point that you're all bringing up, that the investor fit is really important. So one example that I like to give whenever people ask me that question is finding the right investor is like looking for a marriage partner. It has to be the right fit. So there are lots of people out there, not everybody is right for you. So that's something that I think it's good for entrepreneurs to be really clear on. And following up on that, one of the things that Maluz pointed to in her presentation was that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are going through multiple programs. And that's a challenge because they're taking up resources that other entrepreneurs could be using, but it also poses a question: what are they looking for that they haven't yet found? Would one of you like to comment on that? And I'll point to Johnny because he runs on this.
Just repeat the question.
So we have a lot of incubator hoppers.
Yeah.
So they're in every single program. They're doing their reasonable program. Then when you start yours, they'll do yours as well. So what is it that they're looking for that they can't find?
It's quite simple. Capital. Where capital has to be patient, entrepreneurs seem not to be patient. And so if there isn't an immediate fix upon graduating from an incubator or an accelerator, then they'll jump to the next one. And I think that is primarily to do with the fact that one of the things that they need in order to affect the new findings and the new discoveries that they've made with their own business, they need capital for that. And often they can't wait those 3, 6, 12, 18 months it takes to raise that money. And they foolhardily think that jumping from North Africa to Unreasonable, to Village Capital, to OCA, to someone else, that somehow will fix that. So that would be my observation.
That's really interesting because I think Malu's also mentioned that one of the challenges that entrepreneurs who've gone through the programs and have received some business development support have is implementation. And you just said that the reason why they jump from one program to the other is because they don't have the resources to implement the things that they learned. So what is the solution to that? Because the solution is not jumping to the next program. Who would have like an idea of what the solution to that would be?
But I actually think that is emerging right now. Unreasonable is starting with Unreasonable Capital. Village Capital has some kind of funding put at the back end. We keep being pushed by our financial partners to actually have a seed fund at the back of our program, so that at least the top graduates, or whatever you want to call them, from the different programs have an access to that immediate fix. So at least the best of the best, that they have access almost immediately. I don't know if you have perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks for calling us out on that one. We have what we call a revolving loan fund. In addition to there being Unreasonable Capital, which is based in the US, that's working capital loans up to $20,000 that our entrepreneurs are eligible for. So we plan on giving out at least a couple of those before the end of this year. But that's one thing that we've been doing to try to address some of that need.
Okay, now I think I want to take it to the audience now. Turning from an audience into participants. So you actually need to ask some questions and have some answers as well. Do we have anyone with, yes?